Welcome to Evolutionary Biology. Today, we are going to explore one of the most fascinating and well-documented stories in the history of life on Earth, the phylogeny of the horse. Imagine how human technology, like the telephone, has evolved from bulky wall-mounted boxes to sleek smartphones. Nature does something very similar through natural selection. By the end of this lecture, you will understand exactly how a tiny, dog-sized forest creature transformed into the magnificent, fast-running horses we see today, and how we can actually measure this change mathematically. To begin our journey, we need to understand what phylogeny actually means. Simply put, it is the family tree of a species over deep geological time. For the horse family, known as Equidae, this story spans approximately 50 million years, starting in the Eocene epoch. The driving force behind this massive transformation was not random. It was a dramatic global climate shift. As the Earth cooled, dense, soft-leafed forests were gradually replaced by open, tough-grassed savannas. The ancestors of the horse had to adapt to this new environment or face extinction, leading to the incredible physical changes we will look at next. Now that we understand the environmental pressures, why do evolutionary biologists care so much about this specific family tree? The answer is that the horse provides one of the most complete and undeniable pieces of physical evidence for evolution in existence. Before these fossils were discovered, critics often pointed to missing links in the history of life. The horse's phylogeny beautifully fills in those gaps, proving that major physical transformations happen through small, incremental changes over millions of years. Furthermore, it teaches us how environmental shifts directly dictate survival traits, a concept we actively use today to predict how modern animals might respond to ongoing climate change. With the importance of the fossil record clear, let us meet the very first ancestor in this lineage. We begin in the Eocene epoch, about 50 million years ago, with Eohippus, also known as Hyracotherium. Often called the dawn horse, this creature looked nothing like the horses of today. It was only about the size of a fox. Because it lived in dense forests, it had 4 toes on its front feet to help it walk on soft, muddy forest floors. Its teeth were small and specifically adapted for chewing soft leaves, perfectly suited for its woodland habitat. As we move forward in time from Eohippus, the Earth's climate began to cool and dry during the Oligocene epoch. Forests started to shrink, and a new ancestor emerged called Mesohippus. This creature was slightly larger, about the size of a sheep. To adapt to moving across the firmer ground of thinning forests, Mesohippus lost a toe, relying on just 3 toes to run faster and escape predators. This marks a clear physical transition, driven directly by the changing landscape around them. Following the emergence of Mesohippus, the environment continued to change drastically. By the Miocene epoch, vast grasslands had taken over the landscape, giving rise to Merychippus. This ancestor represents a crucial turning point in horse evolution. To survive on tough, gritty grasses instead of soft leaves, Merychippus developed high-crowned teeth that could grind down abrasive food without wearing away. Additionally, while it still possessed 3 toes, only the middle one actually touched the ground. This anatomical shift allowed for much faster running in open spaces. Building on the adaptations of Merychippus, the evolutionary trajectory finally leads us to the horses we recognize today. Next came Pliohippus, which is celebrated as the first truly single-toed horse. The side toes completely disappeared, leaving a single strong hoof. This eventually led to Equus, the modern horse. Equus is the ultimate product of millions of years of natural selection, perfectly adapted for high-speed running across vast plains and continuous grazing on tough savanna grasses. Having traced the lineage from Eohippus to Equus, let us visualize this entire journey. On screen, you are looking at the phylogenetic tree of the horse family. Notice the timeline on the left, starting from the Eocene epoch at the bottom and moving up to the present day. Follow the arrows from the tiny Eohippus at the base, branching up through Mesohippus and Meryhippus, all the way to Equus at the top. Pay close attention to the diagrams of the feet and teeth on the right. You can clearly see the toes reducing from 4 to 3 to a single hoof, while the teeth grow taller and more complex to handle a grazing diet. Now that we have seen the physical changes in the horse's lineage, we must ask, how fast did these changes actually happen? In evolutionary biology, we do not just describe fossils with words, we measure them. To do this, scientists use a mathematical unit called the Darwin, named after Charles Darwin. 1 Darwin represents a change in a specific trait by a factor of the mathematical constant e over 1 million years. This mathematical approach is incredibly powerful because it turns biology into a precise quantitative science, allowing us to see if traits evolved slowly and steadily or in rapid bursts. This brings us to the mathematical formula used to calculate these evolutionary rates. The formula is r equals the natural logarithm of x2 minus the natural logarithm of x1, all divided by delta t. Let us break down what each symbol means. The variable r is the evolutionary rate, measured in Darwin's. x1 is the initial measurement of the trait in the older ancestor, and x2 is the final measurement in the more recent descendant. We use the natural logarithm to measure proportional, percentage-based changes, rather than just absolute differences. Finally, delta t is the time interval between the two fossils, measured in millions of years. If the physical difference increases, the rate goes up. If the time interval increases, the rate goes down. Let us apply this formula to a real-world scenario, the evolution of body mass from the tiny Eohippus to the larger Mesohippus. We are given that the initial mass, x1, was 5 kilograms, and the final mass, x2, was 25 kilograms. The time that passed, delta t, was 20 million years. We substitute these values into our formula. The natural log of 25 is approximately 3.218, and the natural log of 5 is 1.609. Subtracting these gives us a total proportional change of 1.609. Dividing this by 20 million years gives us our final answer. The body mass evolved at a relatively slow and steady rate of 0.08045 Darwins. Before we move on, let us look at another example, this time focusing on a trait that evolved under a sudden environmental crisis, tooth crown height. As forests turned into dusty grasslands, horses needed taller teeth. The initial tooth height for Mesohippus was 10 millimeters. Later, Meryhippus had a tooth height of 30 millimeters. This dramatic change happened over a shorter time span of 10 million years. Plugging these into our formula, we find the natural log of 30 minus the natural log of 10. This evaluates to roughly 3.401 minus 2.302, giving a proportional change of 1.099. Dividing by 10 million years yields a final rate of 0.1099 Darwins. So, we have calculated two different evolutionary rates. But what do these numbers actually tell us biologically? Notice that the evolutionary rate for tooth crown height at roughly 0.11 Darwins is significantly higher than the rate of body mass change, which was about 0.08 Darwins. This tells us a profound biological story about survival and adaptation. The environmental pressure to adapt to eating tough, abrasive grass was incredibly strong. Because survival depended entirely on not wearing their teeth down to the nerve, the horse's teeth were forced to evolve much faster than its overall body size. We have covered the full topic of the horse's phylogeny, so let us review the most important takeaways. First, the horse provides a clear, fossil-backed timeline of adaptation, tracing a lineage from the tiny, multi-toed Eohippus to the large, single-toed Equus. Second, we saw that major physical transformations are directly driven by changing environments, specifically the shift from forests to grasslands. Finally, we learned that evolution is not just a qualitative story. It can be measured mathematically using Darwin's to understand the speed and intensity of natural selection. You now have a comprehensive understanding of how survival requires constant, gradual adaptation to an ever-changing world.